everyone! Why does it sometimes seem like policymakers ignore the best policy option? And I don't just mean the policy that you think is best, but the policy that seems best to align with their objectives. Well, in this video, I'm going to look at Dr. Deborah Stone's policy paradox, which explores why policy making sometimes seems irrational or contradictory. This fits in the agenda setting and policy formulation stages of the policy cycle because it looks at what's on the policy agenda, how problems are defined, and what solutions are acceptable. Let's dive right in. Dr. Deborah Stone is a political scientist and policy scholar who's most well known for emphasizing storytelling in policy decisions. Her defining work, Policy Paradox, The Art of Political Decisions, is the topic of this video, but she has also worked extensively in social policy and health policy. By the 1980s, public policy was widely seen as a rational, technical process driven by data and objective analysis with a heavy reliance on economic models such as cost-benefit analyses. The dominant belief was that policy choices should be made through purely logical reasoning. This coincided with the rise of neoliberalism and the focus on efficiency. So within this context, policy paradox and its focus on storytelling, power, and negotiation was a drastic shift from the predominant thinking of the day. More importantly, it shifted the conversation from how policies ought to be made to one of how policies are actually made, contradictions and paradoxes included. According to Policy Paradox, politicians, journalists, lobbyists, bureaucrats, and activists define problems not just through pure rational thought, but also relying on symbols, numbers, causes, and interests that frame policy decisions in ways that don't always align with a purely rational analysis. So let's look at each of these in turn, starting with symbols. In this context, symbols goes beyond just physical symbols, but also includes symbolic language, so metaphors, framing, and stories. Symbols help simplify complex problems, making them more accessible to the public, but in simplifying the story, interested parties can steer the conversation to build support, create urgency, or shift blame, and exclude parts of the reality from their story that don't serve their agenda. Much like fiction writing, these stories often include victims, villains, and heroes, and craft a timeline of events that creates an emotional connection with the audience. Think about the debate around taxing businesses. One argument is that businesses are job creators, and so increasing taxes on them will stifle growth. While another argument is that businesses should pay their fair share. Both job creators and pay their fair share are symbols used in this debate. Numbers are often thought of as purely neutral, but Dr. Stone argues that they are constructed, framed, and used strategically in order to advance particular agendas. How problems are quantified influences how they're understood and what solutions seem appropriate. Further, numbers are often seen as precise and objective, making policy arguments feel more authoritative. For example, a claim like crime has risen 20% carries weight, but the framing matters. Compared to what baseline, over what time frame, and what crime are we including in that statistic. Numbers, like symbols, simplify complex realities and can be used to amplify fear, justify reforms, or downplay issues. This makes numbers a tool of persuasion, not just a measure of truth. I always mention that public policy is about solving problems, and that an important part of the agenda setting stage is defining the problem. Stone points out that in addition to defining the problem, there's the issue of what causes the problem, and argues that determining the cause of a problem is not a purely rational exercise. Like symbols and numbers, causal stories shape how problems are understood and the solutions that seem appropriate. Causes can be framed as accidental, intentional, mechanical, meaning that it's a problem with a system or poorly designed policy, or inadvertent, meaning it stems from an otherwise well-intentioned action. Think about the causal story around poverty. If the cause of poverty is structural, so discrimination or economic inequality, then the policy design will focus on those structural issues. However, if the cause of poverty is defined more around personal responsibility, that's where policy will focus. The reality is that most problems have multiple causes, but shaping public perception around causality can significantly impact problem definition and ultimately policy decisions. Finally, interests. Stone argues that interests are fluid, constructed, and shaped by political narratives. People aren't only motivated by their immediate self-interest, as rational models would suggest, but are also influenced by identity, persuasion, and collective action. By bringing different people together using symbols, numbers, and causal stories, political actors are able to create an organized group with a shared interest. These interest groups play a key role in helping define what an individual's interests are. People often support issues which are seen as important to the group, even if it doesn't benefit them individually. She's also critical of the concept of the public interest and notes that it's used to frame things as being good for everyone, when it's often really just to serve the interest of the speaker. Once the issues have been framed, the move towards a policy decision involves negotiation, ambiguity, and strategic maneuvering. It is not merely an exercise of choosing the best option based on objective criteria. Strategic ambiguity builds coalitions by enabling stakeholders with conflicting priorities to back the same proposal because in its vagueness it appears to benefit both groups. Negotiation, according to Stone, is more about controlling the terms of the debate and who gets a voice in the discussion. Powerful actors shape process by setting the agenda, defining what counts as valid evidence, and framing trade-offs in ways that benefit their own interests. Even seemingly neutral procedural rules, such as voting thresholds or committee structures, can be used as strategic tools to advance or block policy decisions. The next time you see a hot-button topic in the news, think about how it's being framed. What symbols are being used, what numbers are being highlighted, what causal stories are being told, and whose interests are being considered. Using Dr. Stone's framework, we can see that policy decisions are not just about picking the best choice, but about navigating a complex web of stories, statistics, and strategic negotiations. Understanding these dynamics can give you a deeper insight into why certain policies gain traction and others falter. This approach challenges the idea that policymakers are purely rational and reminds us that they are political, cultural, and social factors at the heart of every decision. To me, there's two big takeaways from policy paradox. The first is figuring out what we're actually maximizing the benefit of. Oftentimes it's not the benefit to society as a whole, but the benefit to the decision maker in how others will view that decision. So for instance, in an oligarchy, it's not the benefit to society, but the benefit to oligarchs that the decision maker is most likely looking to. The second thing is that the benefits themselves do not always matter. It's what the perception of the benefits and costs are. And sometimes, because of symbols, numbers, causal stories, and interests, the perceived cost and benefit can be quite different than what the actual costs and benefits are. But for making a decision, what matters is what the decision maker perceives as the costs and benefit. Policy paradox is certainly excellent in explaining how policy decisions are made, but there are some critiques of it. First, critics argue that Stone's focus on storytelling, while valid, underemphasizes the importance of data-driven assessments in decision making. Think, for instance, about central banks who use economic indicators, especially inflation, to drive their decision making. Also, critics argue that what Stone presents as paradoxes are not true contradictions, but merely the outcome of competing interests and trade-offs, dynamics that can be fully explained using traditional, though complex, models without the need to invoke paradox. Policy paradox challenges the notion that policymaking is a purely rational, straightforward process. Instead, it shows that symbols, numbers, causes, and interests shape decisions. Understanding these dynamics can help us better analyze why certain policies succeed in getting adopted while others fail. It is a good reminder to us that the study of public policy is as much about how policies actually get made as it is about how policies should get made. That's it from me today. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.